In every single high-stakes conversation, there's a sound you don't hear. It's the sound of an anchor dropping. One person drops that anchor, and suddenly, without a single word being said, the entire room just starts to drift around them. Now, this isn't about being charismatic or having the loudest voice. Not at all. This is about understanding the invisible architecture of power. It's a silent set of rules that decides who leads and who follows, long before anyone even makes a point.
And this quote, well, this is the master key. You see, real control isn't about winning the game that's being played. It's about setting the board in the first place. It's about defining reality so subtly that everyone else is convinced they're playing their own game, when really, they're playing by your rules. It is a level of influence that operates almost completely under the radar, and in this explainer, we're going to drag it out into the light.
We call this invisible operating system the ghost script. Think of it like an underlying code that lets certain people steer meetings, negotiations, you name it, without ever raising their voice. They're not using force. They're actually weaponizing the room's own anxiety, its own pace, its own deep-seated need for things to be resolved. They establish dominance so quietly that you only feel the effects. You never see the source.
Okay, so to really get this, we're going to run a full strategic analysis. First, we're going to find the ghost script itself. Then, we'll look at the reactivity trap. That's the exact moment you lose control. Next, we'll map out the machine, the frame control loop. After that, we'll dive into the deep psychology of why this all works, something called the rhythm of wealth. And finally, we'll give you a counterplay book, how to reclaim the rhythm for yourself.
So let's get right into it and pull back the curtain. The ghost script isn't some single tactic you can just learn and use. It's a dynamic. You have to understand it, feel it. It's a pattern where control is won not through what's said, but by deliberately managing time, space, and silence. And to really get just how powerful it is, we need to look at how it traps us, often without us even realizing it.
And this is where it stops being an abstract idea and becomes a real physical experience. Look, most of us have been in this trap, and we never even knew it had a name. It's a feeling, this mounting pressure that just builds and builds until your own mind, your own words, actually start working against you.
Just picture this for a second. You're in a performance review, you're presenting your best work to a senior exec. You finish your point, and then you're met with nothing. Just a calm, steady gaze, a few seconds of silence that start to feel like an eternity. You feel it then, don't you? That conversational itch? It's a real physiological response. Your heart starts to beat a little faster. You feel this desperate, overwhelming urge to just fill the void. So you start talking again, but faster, adding filler words. You know, obviously, does that make sense? You're not explaining anymore, you're performing. You're desperately looking for a nod, any sign of approval, anything to relieve the crushing pressure of their silence. That right there, that's the first sign you've been caught.
Now, what's fascinating here is what's happening in your brain. This state has a name, the erosion of executive sovereignty. Your brain perceives the other person's silence as a kind of social threat, and it makes this primal trade-off. It just discards authority because it's desperately seeking the feeling of safety. The quiet feels like judgment, like danger, so your brain floods your mouth with words to try and find some kind of secure ground. You are effectively being emotionally managed by an invisible frame they've set up, and you don't even see the bars of the cage.
And this slide just illustrates the devastating result. We call this status atrophy. Because when you can't tolerate that silence, you start leaking valuable information. You reveal your entire negotiating position. You start watering down your own best ideas before they've even been challenged. You offer concessions nobody even asked for. You might literally walk out of that performance review having negotiated yourself out of a promotion, all because the pressure tank they built just by saying nothing became too much to handle. You ended up betraying your own position.
So, how is this pressure tank built? Well, it's not by accident. It's a system. It's a machine with 4 distinct parts. So let's break down these 4 stages. We're going to shift from the feeling of being in the trap to the cold, hard mechanics of how the trap is actually set. Okay, let's dissect this thing. Step 1 is the latency buffer. After you finish talking, the dominant person doesn't answer right away. They pause. This strategic pause, this latency, it's a weapon. It's designed to trigger your brain's internal error monitoring system, which just starts screaming, something is wrong. What I just said was wrong or wasn't good enough. And that's when you jump back in to fix a problem that doesn't even exist, talking over yourself and weakening your own point. This is the very moment control begins to shift. Next is step 2, the minimalist anchor. When they finally do speak, their sentences are short, dense, and packed with value. They don't use polite fluff. They won't say, well, I think maybe we should consider the possibility of no. They say, the core issue is X. This forces you to do all the hard work of interpretation. They become this unmoving statue, and you become the frantic interpreter trying to figure out what they mean, which automatically puts them in a higher status position. Then there's step 3, spatial claiming. While all this is going on, just watch their body language. They are still. No fidgeting, no nervous tapping. This confident stillness, this minimal movement, non-verbally dominates the space. Your brain's own status radar subconsciously reads this stillness as power, and it makes you adjust to make yourself smaller, which sends a biological signal through your own body that you are in a subordinate role. And finally, step 4. This is where the trap slams shut, the summary closure. At the very end of the conversation, they are the one to define what was decided. Great, so we've decided on X. Now, even if the conversation was a total mess and no clear decision was made, the person who gets to frame the summary owns the conclusion. They have literally rewritten the history of the meeting in real time, and their version is now the official record.
So, that's the how. That is the 4-stage machine designed to make one person the calm observer and everyone else a nervous performer. But the real question, the critical question, is why? Why does this work so unbelievably well on the human brain? What deep psychological wiring is this system exploiting so perfectly?
Well, the answer is rooted in a really powerful cognitive shortcut called the Fluency Heuristic. And this is the very foundation of what we're calling the rhythm of wealth. You see, our brains are hardwired to make snap judgments to save energy. And one of the most powerful ones is this. We instinctively, automatically associate slowness and stillness with certainty and with power. I mean, think about it. Who's in a hurry? The person who's late, the person who's nervous, the person who needs something from you. And who's calm and slow? The person who has a wealth of resources, a wealth of time, of options, of authority. They know the room isn't going to move on without them.
This slide really puts it in stark terms. Our whole culture tells us that speed is a sign of intelligence, right? Of efficiency. But in a social hierarchy, that's just not how our primal brain sees it. The status radar in our brain is constantly scanning for signals. Talking fast, moving quickly, these are read as subordinate signals. They signal a need for approval. Slow, deliberate speech and stillness, they signal certainty. The person with the highest status, the true anchor in the room, almost always has the slowest, most deliberate pace. Their calmness signals a kind of wealth that everyone else feels they have to orbit around.
And there's a second psychological layer here that really locks this all in. During those strategic pauses, we become victims of something called uncertainty reduction theory. Basically, our brains hate ambiguity. So when we're met with that wall of silence, we don't assume the other person is just thinking, or maybe they're even confused. No, instead we fill that terrifying void with our own insecurities. We project incredible competence onto them. We tell ourselves a story. Wow, they must be 3 steps ahead of me. They're analyzing my idea from every possible angle. They've definitely spotted the flaw that I missed. In our own minds, we build them a throne, and then we invite them to sit on it.
Okay, so we've seen the system, and we understand the deep psychology that it plugs into. Now we move to the counter playbook. How do you protect yourself? How do you restore your own authority when you feel it slipping? This is not about learning how to dominate other people, it's about learning how not to be dominated. So let's get into the practical, tactical steps.
Here are 4 direct countermeasures you can use. First, and this is the most important one, you have to master the 2-second buffer. When someone asks you a question, especially a tough one, you do not answer immediately. You pause. You take a breath and you silently count to 2 in your head. This tiny little action is absolutely monumental. It breaks their rhythm, and more importantly, it restores your own executive sovereignty. It gives your rational brain time to catch up with your anxious one. It sends a clear signal that says, I am choosing my words, they are not just falling out of me because I'm scared. Second, you've got to avoid the explanation spiral. If you make your point and you get that wall of silence, that latency buffer, you do not clarify. You do not add more information. Your job is to hold that silence right there with them. If it becomes too much, shift the cognitive load back to them. You can ask a calm, open-ended question like, I'm curious to hear your perspective on that. Make them do the work. Make them be the one to fill the silence. Third, maintain spatial integrity. Your body teaches your brain how to feel. If you fidget or shrink in your chair or look away, you're broadcasting subordination. Instead, focus on stillness. Keep an open posture with your chest and torso open. This signals security not only to their brain, but critically, it signals safety and confidence back to your own. And finally, you must label the summary.
Never, ever let a biased summary closure go unchallenged. If someone ends a meeting by saying, okay, so we've decided on X and that is not accurate, you have to correct the record immediately and precisely. Not aggressively, but firmly. You can say, just to be precise, we haven't decided on X, we've only agreed to explore Y as a potential next step. This action is so critical. It resets the status balance and it reclaims the shared story of what actually happened.
So really, the crucial insight here is this. We've been chasing the wrong thing. We thought authority was about talking the most, or having the most data, or being the loudest person in the room. But the Ghost Scripts shows us that true authority is the opposite. It is economic. It's efficient in its movement and in its language. It's about embodying a sense of certainty so profound that the entire room feels this magnetic pull to slow down, to lean in, and to wait for you to speak. You become the anchor.
And this is the final thought, the mental weapon I want you to carry with you. The pause is not a judgment. The silence is not an attack. It is simply an absence of noise. The moment you stop performing for that void and instead learn to command it, to own it, you collapse their entire system. Don't let their rhythm manage you. Own your own.